who put a lot of time and energy into this organization year-round, and specifically into this every other year reunion. We all know from our careers in a variety of fields that good things don't just happen. There's always someone behind the scenes making it work just right. And so I think we should recognize Bill Dooley, Chris Williams, Chris Golden, Tom Stewart, Ned Devereaux, and Mike Davis. You know, as it is so often, just a few end up serving many. And certainly I think that's true for the leadership of our association. I also want to double recognize the senior dragoons in the audience tonight. These, of course, are World War II and constabulary period veterans. So let's give them another round. Before the dancing starts, because I understand we're going to lose control here after a while. These folks. Now, also a few colonels of the regiment, former colonels of the regiment, have joined the group that were recognized earlier. So let me just run through this if I can. 63rd Colonel John Gillelli is here. The 66th John Everly. The 67th Tom Molino. The 71st Terry Wolf, newly minted Army Lieutenant General, and now the J5 in charge of policy plans at the Joint Staff. Terry's back here. The 75th Jim Blackburn, and of course the current RCO Keith Barkley, number 76. So let's give them all. So 35 years ago, this year, I joined my very first unit as a brand new second lieutenant, cavalry. And I went to 1st Squadron, 2nd ACR in Binlach, Germany. Now, most Americans have never heard of Binlach. That was true then, and it's also true today. In fact, when I first received my assignment orders in late 1975, ordering me to go to Binlach by May of 1976, my parents back in Indiana, who received, I think, by convention at that time, they received a copy of my PCS orders. They went immediately to a map of Germany, and they could not find Binlach on the map. And the name, after all, was a little suspicious anyway. I mean, Binlach doesn't sound German. In fact, it sounds Vietnamese. And of course, at the time, there was more than a little suspicion in America about anything having to do with our military. Remember, just a couple months before that, the last helicopters had left the roof of our embassy compound in Saigon, ending a war that had deeply divided America. So for some time, my mother, back in Michigan City, Indiana, suspected that Binlach was in fact not in Germany. Not in Germany at all, but rather that the government was once again lying, and that this Binlach was actually in Vietnam, where the U.S. must still have combat troops. So it took me about 2 years of living in Binlach, Germany, and actually bringing them over there so that they could see the town sign that said Binlach before she was fully convinced that the government wasn't taking her son away to someplace in Southeast Asia. It turns out one of the best things that happened to me, though, was the selection of first assignment to the 2nd Cav, and then beyond that, my good fortune of being assigned to Binlach, where I was able to learn the profession of arms in this regiment. Now, many of you here tonight will remember that the regiment in 1976 was one of the best units in a troubled army. We were at the cutting edge of the Cold War, patrolling the inner German border, the Iron Curtain, but we were also struggling with the realities of an army just beginning to recover from the Vietnam experience. Priorities for personnel, equipment, and training were just beginning to shift at that point back to Germany. after the drawdown from Vietnam. But we had a long way to go. Arriving in 1st Squadron, I was assigned to take 1st Platoon of B Troop. My sponsor at that time and the outgoing platoon leader was 2nd Lieutenant Marty Dempsey, who you may have heard of recently. He, of course, is now the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the senior military officer in the American system. These days, I see Marty quite regularly in the White House Situation Room. And once in a while, we reminisce about the days in Binlock. It seems a long way away. And today, we work not on the problems of 1st Platoon, but on some of the challenges of the fight in Afghanistan and Pakistan, which are the areas which I spend most of my time on. Tonight, I'd like to share with you 2 big lessons that I've learned first in those formative sort of wonder bread years in Binlock, but which today still work for me in the White House Situation Room. The first lesson, you have to master your job. Whether you're a platoon leader in a border cav squadron or a senior advisor in the White House, expertise is the coin of the realm. You have to master your brief. You have to master your portfolio. It's my experience that learning, studying, and building expertise is a lifelong task. In the regiment in those days, expertise was what separated the best officers from the others. I suspect that this is exactly the same today. As brand new 2nd lieutenants, there was plenty of learning to do. Technical learning. The platoon's weapon systems ranged from the 152mm main gun on the Sheridan through the 4.2-inch mortar all the way to the 45 caliber pistol. We had to maintain 10 vehicles in each cavalry platoon, including the infamously unreliable Sheridan, the M551A1. The alert procedures in Germany in that day were quite precise and quite demanding. That all was a lesson. And then we had to learn the basics of platoon leadership, like how to conduct a pre-combat inspection. There was tactical learning to be done, how to operate in the field, how to maneuver and live fire the platoon, how to perform the full range of cavalry missions. Mastering your assigned role in the General Defense Plan. This was the war plan for Germany at the time, the GDP. Right down to memorizing individual vehicle positions. We had to operate routinely for 6 weeks at a time along arguably the most politically sensitive border, the inter-German border in the world at that time. And perhaps most important, there was leadership training, leadership learning, the vital role of the non-commissioned officer, setting and enforcing standards, balancing the sometimes competing demands of troops and mission. I learned from some master leaders, like my platoon sergeant, my first platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Bob Morton, with whom I'm still in touch, and then First Sergeant Ned Devereaux, who's here tonight, a close friend to this day. There was a lot of learning to do in Binlock in those days, and we weren't perfect. On a light note, as I was thinking about tonight, I remembered the written test, actually a multi-page written exam, that every soldier was required to pass in order to actually be allowed to patrol along this very sensitive German border. And for those, I see some veterans here nodding their head, okay, you'll remember the border test, right? This was one of the last gates through which the soldier had to pass so he could actually go out and do what he wanted to do, which was get in a 2-jeep patrol and go look at the communists. So he had to pass this test. One multiple choice question in particular had to do with the border stones that were interspersed along the border at regular intervals. And some of you are again nodding your head. You'll remember these border stones. The stone itself marked the actual, Bob Young knows this well, marked the actual trace of the inter-German border. Okay, and these stones were marked in a peculiar way. So if you were in West Germany and you were looking into Czechoslovakia, this stone, which stood about 1 meter high, concrete stone, right, was labeled CS for the Czech Soviet Socialist Republic. In other words, Czechoslovakia. And you knew you were in Germany looking at Czechoslovakia. Now, the other side of the same stone was marked DP, or for Deutsche Bundesrepublik. In other words, the formal name of West Germany at the time. And we went through great lengths to train our young troopers that they were supposed to see CS, okay, meaning that they were in Germany, and they were not supposed to see DB. Okay, and occasionally you'd see a young soldier right along the border trace with CS here, and he'd be looking over the sign to see, in fact, if DB was on this. So one of the questions on this multiple choice border test at the time was, what does the DB on a border stone stand for? Okay? And of course the right answer was A, for example, Deutsche Bundesrepublik. That was not the most frequently selected answer, which typically was C, which said that the DB stood for the border. Okay?
The border.
So you get some sense. Now, the rest of the story is that we actually gave credit for that answer, okay? Because it was close enough, okay? And we needed people to patrol the border. Okay, so whenever you think of the Army in 1976, you have to sort of remember the times.
The border.
So mastering your job was really important in 1976 in Finlock, and it turns out it's equally important, if not more important today in the White House. My motto for the last 4 years of duty in the White House is substance wins. And what I mean by that, as issues come up, tough political issues come up for decision by the Principals Committee, so the cabinet, if you will, or sometimes by the President himself, there are a lot of factors they have to consider. They have to consider economic factors, they have to consider political factors, and so forth. But my experience is that most often in those decisions, substance, knowing, having expertise on the subject matter, knowing what you're talking about, making a reasonable argument, usually substance wins. I tell my team, we have to know what we're talking about. We have to have command of the facts. We have to have deep enough understanding to see challenges and opportunities that are not obvious at first glance. I tell my team at the National Security Council that I expect them to spend at least 2 hours a day studying their account, reading background materials, intelligence products, and doing and contacting outside government sources. I try to do the same. So in a 12 or 13-hour day, I tell them I expect you. Remember, you used to be told, we expect you to do PT on your duty day, physical training. I expect my guys to do 2 hours of reading on the duty day. We have to be students